So now it's my pleasure to moderate the day's first discussion on OTT, content, technology, and monetization. I don't need to tell anyone in this room how important this platform has become, or maybe I do. TV News Check is actually at work right now on a conference later this spring entirely devoted to it and its implications for broadcasters, which are profound, tectonic, and ongoing. With me on stage this morning are four people who have been deeply immersed in the OTT world. Let me get the order correctly here. Should have matched that. Jeff Benninghoff, who's a couple over to my left, is the VP and GM of WWSB in Sarasota, Florida, where he was early to launch an OTT channel for his station on what was then the Calkins platform. Ian Stinson is the Executive Director of Digital Audience and Product for Cox Media Group, where he has been rolling out station apps on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV, including those with heavy volumes of original content, WSB in Atlanta and WFTV in Orlando. Frank Munjum has been newly appointed the Knight Professor of Television Innovation at Arizona State University's Cronkite School of Journalism, and before that he was the Vice President of Digital Audience Engagement at Tegna, where he was heavily involved in OTT content and all sorts of digital content. And finally, Derek Gebler, to the far left, is the Vice President of Broadcasting and Video for Town News, which offers a platform for television stations and newspapers to launch their own OTT channels. I have a lot of questions for you today, so let's start right with kind of a establishing question. There are still broadcasters, perhaps some in this room, who are tentative about entering the OTT space with their local news product. First, Frank, to briefly kick us off, why is that hesitance problematic?
Well, if you want to have a future, because this was the year that OTT tipped, and for the first time we saw more time-shifted viewing than live linear. And so I see it as big a shift as the shift to mobile from web for digital, where really the default habit for consumers for that lean-back screen, going home in the evening, for example, is starting in an OTT, a Netflix environment. The biggest threat to you in a local TV market today is not channel X up the dial, it's the fact that if the audience starts on Netflix, they're not in the live linear space. And so it's the oldest rule we have, fish where the fish are. We have to be present in those spaces.
And Ian, what about your thoughts about this? Is hesitance valid? I mean, is there some level of where that's a healthy skepticism that a broadcaster might have?
I don't think the skepticism should be around the opportunity with OTT. There could potentially be, as you move audiences to OTT, there could be challenges to your traditional platforms. But I think there's a huge opportunity, and I think it's a mistake to not take OTT seriously. I think of OTT as similar to newspapers Craigslist, where it presents a significant challenge to how we're going to operate going forward, and so we need to embrace it and figure out how to move forward with OTT as part of our overall digital and broadcasting strategy.
So we have three subsets we're going to talk about with OTT today: content, monetization, technology. I want to start with content, and in terms of what's most appropriate for this platform. And what do we know so far about what news content audiences are receptive to on OTT? So Ian, let's start with you. You're heading up OTT efforts for Cox. Tell us how your stations are tackling OTT. Where are they? How much content are they producing there? And how much is original content for the platform?
Well, it'd probably be too lengthy to talk about all those things, but I'll just say, you could say we break it up into thirds. So we have stations producing or taking about a third of their content from what they have on air. They produce maybe another third locally that is primarily for OTT, but it shows up on other platforms as well. And then we have a centralized group. I have a colleague named Robbie Aaron who operates a national content desk. They produce content as well that shows up on those channels. So we actually have at least those three inputs, and some stations are farther along than others, but we have several that are doing 24/7 streams now. So think of it like 2.2, 2.3. It's now another channel with its own programming, some programming that appears on the traditional broadcast and some that's unique to OTT.
And it's Atlanta and Orlando that are the most
Yes, they're the farthest along.
So where do you see the audience gravitating to the most in terms of content on those two stations?
Well, I think it depends on the day and what's going on. So I will say that during the recent hurricanes and even hurricanes last year, we saw a significant audience moving to breaking news and weather. But I think that it depends on the day, and it also depends on the audience, meaning the demographic and other things in terms of what they're most interested in.
Jeff, you've had a very robust presence, OTT presence at WWSB for several years now. Can you also lay out for us what you're putting out there and on what platforms?
Yeah, it's a multi-pronged approach for the content that we have. The channel actually started out as a need. Right now we are situated in the dead center of the Florida Peninsula. We're sandwiched between, we're licensed to the Tampa DMA, but we're sandwiched between Tampa, which is about 70 miles north of us, and Fort Myers DMA. So the need came out of the fact that we were being carried on the cable systems in the northern part of the Fort Myers DMA. The ABC affiliate WZVN invoked their network non-dupe rights where we were carried, so we were taken off the system pretty quickly. When we were taken off the system, the audience did not understand that the difference between the Fort Myers and the Tampa DMA. As a result, we were getting a number of calls, and our transmitter was a little bit too far for some of these households to receive us, so the need came out of servicing those viewers, even though they're not in our DMA, in Fort Myers. With that said, we started off initially with just getting our newscast up there to service them. Very shortly thereafter, as we were getting feedback, we quickly migrated from just a newscast with slates, which did not do much. Whenever you put a slate up, it doesn't do anything. So we quickly added other programming. I've worked with a lot of syndicators, barter syndicators. Had to work with our engineering department to repurpose some of our newscasts we do 7.5 hours of local programming a day. So basically, I'll give you an example. From 5 to 7 a.m., we do local news. From 7 to 9, we do Good Morning America. So from 7 to 9, one, I don't have the network rights. Two, I don't have the network rights, but also two, the other issue we had is actually being able to turn it around in a short period of time with the existing staff we had. So I'm sorry, I'm getting a little long-winded. I'll make this quick. So basically, to get to the point, we've got 15 hours of local news. We've got syndicated programming, and we're using our existing broadcast system, not DFP. Well, we are using DFP, but when we launched it, we're using existing broadcast system to do commercial insertion via a playlist through our automation system, as well as wide orbit to traffic the channel.
So you had a little bit of a situational boost because of the market situation right out of the gate.
That's correct. And then we're also doing full-length VOD assets, and then also we have sponsored content where we provide advertisers the ability to have their own channel embedded in our platform to generate their own original content.
And the VOD, I've heard from a lot of stations that's the least popular stuff. They want the live and the linear. Do you find that to be the case?
That is absolutely the truth. It was that was the biggest head end I had with our development team back in about 4.5, 5 years ago. Was they only watch them in snackable bites. I'm like, that's fine. We'll do snackable bites. I want my newscast and all the programming we do locally all available in VOD as well as the linear. I got a lot of pushback on the linear feed because back then the consensus was they don't watch it that way. Really, the sum was I want to provide it in any format that the audience would desire to consume it in, and pretty much for convenience.
And the syndicated part of that, how does that do for you?
It does okay. It fills a void. We've been tweaking it over the years. Again, we've done it on the cheap, so it does all right. We build blocks, and we're selling them around blocks, such as an outdoor block or a fishing block. So we're still tweaking that and developing what makes the most sense strategic-wise, as well as timing and the audience. So,
Frank, when you were at Tegna, I know the content you were making was for all the digital platforms, but can you talk a little bit about your OTT trajectory there?
Yeah, it's interesting, walk, jog, run, right? So we got on Roku very early. We've probably been on Roku 4.5 years, and you just look in the data, right? You don't judge the audience. It's a new platform. You put your content there, and you see what they do with it. And in the beginning, all they did was just behave the same way they would behave with linear TV, which frankly to me was super disappointing. They just watched the newscast on a different platform. It's like, really? OTT enables you to time shift and watch what you want when you want it. But we've really seen that behavior change over time. And I have to say, I've probably learned more in terms of what I think smart OTT strategy is from YouTube and our experiences with YouTube. And think about how millennials use YouTube. They pick what they want, watch it when they want it on the device of their choice. And if you talk to YouTube about content strategy, there's events, that must see. So we see the same thing. When you've got huge weather or breaking news, that's when you get downloads to your OTT app. But so that's a spike. But then there's serial content, which in the olden days of TV, what's old is now new. Those weekly series that you do that are local, enterprise, original, that person that you like, in an OTT world, it's much easier to find, and you can actually now binge on our OTT channels on that one episodic in the same way that people watch Netflix. And then the last thing is kind of that explainer, evergreen category. I mean, we're doing a lot of original digital, I should say now, Tegna. It's only been 2 weeks. Original digital episodic content that actually is much better in that kind of on-demand environment. So what I've seen in the 4 years is the audience actually becoming more sophisticated about how to use OTT for what it does uniquely well, rather than just use it as another way to watch TV. So I think there's a little bit of patience required on our end, and a little bit of working backwards from what is, of the content that we make, what is the best experience for the audience, and how can they use OTT for their benefit to make viewing more convenient.
It's interesting on the evergreen point. Emily Cassie, who was on the panel yesterday from the Marshall Project, was talking about a piece she did for part of which we showed from left field about drug trafficking of addicts and the tail on that, and just the viewers who are still coming to it. It's just lasted much longer than it might have in some other context. This is a question for any of you to jump in on. How important is it to be content versioning your news on OTT? Don't be shy.
What do you mean by versioning? Do you mean you put out a 3-minute news clip and you want to update that as opposed to?
Or, yeah, and it needs to be malleable for the form in some different way.
I'll go quick. Yeah, so we started cheap. I mean, right, and I think one of the things we'll get into, right, is how do you make business sense of this when the audience isn't really there yet? And so in the beginning, it was literally the A block. We would take the first section of the newscast, and after live linear, that was actually the second most popular thing that we offered on our OTT channels. Very easy to do and low cost. You're not creating new content. But we all know that's not made for platform. And so the next thing in sort of the Tegna iteration was how can you design short headline blocks that are refreshed regularly throughout the day, that are made for OTT, but can you use them for other places as well? So is it something that can go on Facebook as watch? Is it something that can go on your YouTube channel? So I think that's the pathway, is find sort of efficient in-between steps until there's enough audience and enough revenue. I mean, that's the workflow progression that it makes sense to me.
And we have talked in the past about bespoke OTT content, or even the prospect of wholly original OTT channels, and the potential, for instance, of an investigation channel, which so many news enterprises emphasizing or building up their investigative reporting operations. And then, Frank, you also mentioned once the notion of news nuggets of A-block materials that could be potentially even seeded out to larger OTT channels like Netflix or Amazon Prime. So what's the thinking about those different? Right? Anyone can take those routes.
When we talk about investigative channels, for example, our parent corporation, Raycom, is doing just that. We've launched an investigative TV platform on Roku probably about 5-6 months ago, and it's been very successful. But the key to that is making sure that you're able to get the word out, that folks know that it's there. If folks don't know that it's there, they're not going to go to it. So, being part of a large corporation, we've got a fantastic boomstick, on 65 different stations that we can go ahead and promote the platform. So with the strength of the size of the company that we have, we've been able to be pretty successful with the audience, and it's been growing quite substantially. To what extent and details, I don't have those details at my level, at the station level, but it's been very successful that they've been working on.
So there's not a hesitance to promote that. Sometimes there is. You hear.
Not at all, and everything's based, and everything's got to be taken in perspective. The size of the organization. Again, I've got two mind frames. One from when I was just a small broadcast group, so we put everything together with bubble gum and popsicle sticks to make it work on 68 FTEs. Now that we've got resources, we're able to really invest more. So when the question comes up about having additional original OTT only content, we're at that point right now where I'm excited we're able to do it.
Well, and Michael, I would add, I think there's a fair criticism made. It's certainly in the local broadcast TV space. 8 hours a day, and we all know how hard that is. But really, how many of those hours are outstanding, and how much is duplication?
Yeah.
And so there can be a great story that can be really hard to find in the live linear environment. And so this creates the opportunity for content creators really to make the needle visible without the haystack. That structured playlist where you actually can find and binge watch the good stuff that you like, and your list can be different from my list, and we both get a better experience.
And that's where the technology comes in to make. As the technology's come this past 4.5, 5 years, I've got a lot of pushes that I want as far as searchability, promotion from within inside the platform, automatic promotion. A lot of the stuff Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu automatically do, a lot of the small broadcasters have not been able to do until recently with the change in the technology.
So on the technology front, Derek, Town News helps TV stations and newspapers get their video content launched on OTT, but getting content from the station meted out to the many different OTT platforms available, Apple News, Roku, Amazon Fire, for instance, can't be that simple on the back end. So how much friction is still in the process for individual newsrooms, and where are the biggest pain points still on the technology side?
Some of the friction is coming from providers where if you're getting syndicated content in from somewhere that's unique, there's some friction in integrating all the different providers. On the CMS side, so Town News, our block CMS is already ingesting lots of content from all over the place for our current web customers. And something that we're doing is leveraging that engine that's already doing that and then pushing that out for OTT as well. So once we've integrated it, the next person that comes down the line, it's less hard to do. So there are some places that make it just difficult to get the content just through licensing, or that's a means of control or what have you, but I think the more that we do it and the more providers that are out there that are leveraging APIs that we can commonly frame up so that we can repackage and use over and over again, it's getting easier. But it's not like several years ago. It was difficult to share content, share video content. Places just didn't want to do it. I think it wasn't even a technical problem. It was they just didn't want to share the content because it was their content. Mm-hmm. On our side, we're looking at we've got a way for our current customers at least to start sharing content so that there's a licensing deal so that you can get money for the content you're sharing, and it could end up somewhere else that as long as you've hit the okay, that content automatically can end up somewhere else. OTT, especially video content, is one of the areas that needs, it's specialized. It's not like articles, it's not like story content. The video content is still, I don't want to say lacking, but it's a scarce resource. Mm-hmm. And as we saw yesterday, a lot of work and effort goes into creating really good video content, and that's always going to be the difficulty, is trying to figure out where it is and how do you get it. And on the OTT side, we're trying to make that easier.
Jeff or Ian, do either of you have any particular technological friction points still that are worth emphasizing?
Well, I think he brings up a good point when it comes to sharing content and creating sort of a repository. So as an example, we have 10 TV stations. If we want to create one piece of content that could be used by all 10, there are some challenges to being able to do that. I think that's where a CMS or other platforms can emerge. I think that it's probably early stages. Some of the companies I've talked to that provide a solution or could provide a solution that we want, they're not quite there yet. You know, it's not a turnkey opportunity at this point. You know, you'd have to work a little bit to share content easily across the group, and especially if you're going outside and get syndicated content that there might be some sort of business rules or business relationships there. It gets more challenging, and I don't think there's an obvious solution or obvious vendor out there right now.
Have you had those hiccups with syndication?
No, I have not with the syndicators. And the issue, there's two issues. One with syndication, and two with commercial advertising. So you just can't take the existing newscasts and commercials and just repurpose it on your platform. There's licensing issues with SAG and a number of other problems that could happen. We have not had those issues with that. And the other one is syndicators, is making sure you negotiate the rights. I'm not geofenced, so and for reasons I stated earlier was because I straddle the Fort Myers DMA. If we were geofenced or locked down to the Tampa DMA, it's not an issue. Really, what I'm in the Tampa DMA, I'm pretty much the station of last resort. So if you don't have your show cleared on any of the Tampa stations, you're coming to me. So I get some leverage with a lot of the syndicators, particularly the barter syndicators, that are willing to negotiate with me. I'll take you on this platform if, I'll give you multiple runs on this platform, and over the years it's been getting easier and easier to do that. The biggest issue I have with technology is probably me. I'm a GM, so typically I run in, throw the grenade, and walk out and let other people figure it out. Because I want the technology. I want more than what we have right now. So I've been trying to get our system, our existing platform, upgraded so much more. And when I say that, I'm sorry, I'll speed up. When I say that, I've got one of my revenue streams is sponsored content. So when you look at our platform, on one of what we're doing right now is we had to design the advertising package or the sponsorship package to fit the platform, not the platform to fit the sponsorship. So those type of things, and we got it done. To me, it's not very pretty. It's not what I want it to be, but I don't have that developer right there, sitting next to me or sitting in my station where I can say, go ahead and do that. There's a lot more involved in that. So that's where the friction from my end comes from, is throwing out those crazy ideas that I want done immediately.
When Apple News, Amazon Fire, Roku, and the like, those platforms are themselves constantly iterating. Ian or Derek, how much strain does that put on news organizations just to keep up with those incessant iterations?
I'll just say we have an internal development team, so I would say the stress is probably lower for us. As they evolve their platforms, we can evolve with them. I think if you're an organization where you don't have internal development resources, you're going to be dependent on a platform. It's going to depend on that platform to reduce that stress, or you're going to have to make sure you pick a platform that's staying up to speed with them.
Right, and I think it came up yesterday, there was a use case where there was a station that hadn't updated their Roku in 3 years. So once it goes out there, it kind of slowly degrades. And if you're not actively staying on top of it or have a vendor, so I think we support 5 different platforms. Roku, Amazon, Apple, Samsung, and one other.
Don't say Yahoo.
No, but to try to stay on top of that's a lot to stay on top of, and then to work that into your regular development cycle on top of that, it's a constant churn, and if you're not paying attention to it, it's going to slowly degrade. Things aren't going to break, but those platforms are going to continue to upgrade their operating systems, and things will start to look dated.
And Michael, I would just add, that I think as a broadcaster, you should ask yourself, what is your core competency, right? And my perspective would be, I'm not sure most broadcasters are really great technology companies. I think in the main, we're in the content business. And, when I was at Tegna leading our Roku effort, Roku retired their entire first generation display. And we had a dev team, and we did that, but we had to rebuild the entire thing from scratch. And then, you know, is good enough to get live, but then if you want to actually deliver a great experience on each one of those platforms, I mean, some of them support auto play on launch now, others don't. And so if you have a particular point of view about what you want the user experience to be, there are subtleties in the execution and every time there's an update. So I mean, I do think it's a fair question for a broadcaster or a content creator to ask themselves, do we want to be in the dev side business, or do we want to partner with somebody who specializes in that piece and we focus on creating great content?
Well, this also compels the question of resources. How much stations or station groups should expect to have to add on to competently take on a viable OTT presence? So to all of you, how did you need to add staff or reallocate resources in order to accommodate OTT?
Well, I can't speak too much about what we've done in that regard. I'll just say we have added some resources. We've had a development team that's working on our OTT apps. I'd say it depends on market size to some degree. So if you're in a larger market, there may be a higher return on your investment, and so you could probably justify more investment. If you're in a smaller market, it may be a little bit more challenging. You might want to incrementally work with the teams that you have in place before making a larger investment.
Yeah, from our perspective, we did it without adding any additional FTEs or body count. What it did take into play is working with our engineering and our news folks to redo the workflow, work on the workflow, put a lot more responsibilities on the engineering staff. We put more responsibilities on the editors to go ahead and turn that around. From a programming perspective, I handled all the programming, myself dealt with that. My biggest resource, the biggest resources for us was adding an additional wide orbit channel, which, you know, $500 a month, and any bandwidth charges that we had that would exceed any overage. So those were the two biggest resources we were faced with.
I want to talk about ad tech too. Ian, how would you assess the state of ad technology for OTT at this point? You put a lot of weight behind the importance of dynamic ad insertion in the equation. So how reliably has that developed?
Oh, well, I don't know. I feel confident about the reliability of the solution. We've implemented dynamic ad insertion across 7 of our 10 stations, and we're working on the remaining stations. I think DAI is essential going forward, honestly. We've looked at different paths. We've looked at paths where we just use wide orbit, or not wide orbit, but we use like Cisco, or we just do a stream where we don't actually insert ads dynamically. But I think long term, the challenge is going to be these broadcasts or these OTT platforms are going to have to probably offer personalized content. So you may come in a certain demographic, you get one piece of content. You may come in as a different demographic, you're probably going to get a different kind of content. And so to enable that, you're also going to want to have personalized ads as well. So the content will be personalized and the advertising will be personalized, so that the entire experience and the engagement would be improved for every single person who comes into that platform. So I think DAI has to be a path that stations pursue going forward.
I've spoken to some vendors who put DAI's role in a kind of chicken and egg relationship with having direct OTT sales happening at the station level. Jeff, you've had some experience with this at your station. Can you explain how WWSB got into that direct sales approach? You kind of got into those circumstances a little before, but can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So basically, we started off with a direct sales approach regarding educating our sales folks. The one thing about using wide orbit and pretty much what Ian said, it's basically a D2, over IP. Our sales folks were 4 years ago were not very good at selling DFP, dynamic ad insertion, or any of it. They didn't understand any of that. What they did do well was they know how to sell spot TV. So the first part was, guys, this is what this is. Here's wide orbit. Here's the second channel. Here's the second channel on wide orbit. Here's the rate card. The one part of that was they know how to sell off wide orbit rate cards and price differently. So the value proposition to the clients was not, here, you're going to spend $10,000 for a month package. No, that's not the value proposition. You're going to sell it based on relationships, and based on educating the client. Second part was to educate, when I say educate the client, is making sure that when we go out and do any of our pitches, the first thing we're doing, besides having the AE fully understand the channel, was we're taking out either a Fire Stick, or a Roku stick, or an Apple TV. Well, not Apple, that was a little pricey back then at the time, still is. And give it to a client and install it at their facility with them there, versus don't give it to them, install it there. That way you have, too many times they'll install it, they put it in their desk, and it'll never happen again. Once they get that and they see the channel, they fully understand what it's about. And the third part is basically developing that relationship on here's the opportunities on this platform, and brainstorming with the clients. Some of the clients have some great ideas that come up with, well, can you guys do this? Can you do that? And that's where I come in with the grenade and say, we need to do this. But it's a multi-revenue approach, and working with the client, and they've got, and using them to help drive the platform as well.
And you're also selling in day parts.
Yes.
Can you talk a little about that, and also your platform sponsorships?
Yeah, so we're selling, like I said before, we're selling it based on a rate card and spot advertising. And what we've discovered too was that the audience on our OTT platform does not mirror the audience on our main platform. I'll give you an example. When we're in Prime, I repeat our newscast from 5 to 6:30, and then 7 to 8 in our Prime block. Our Prime block in our market turns out to be the higher rating. So what we had to do was reconfigure that, and all right, we're going to change the pricing. It's going to be higher in our Prime and lower in different day parts based on where the audience is. The second revenue model that we use, we do sell DFP. And we also, for the VOD assets, and we also sell sponsorship content. So basically the sponsorship content was, look, you can own this platform, or you can have 50% share of voice of this platform. You will be located, right now we have 100% share of voice until we sell another one. For fee, you're gonna be branded all through the platform. And then in addition to that, you're gonna have your own channel on our platform. In that channel, I'll give you our title sponsor right now is Mr. Sparky. It's a franchise electrician. So we worked with them, and they wanted to put the commercials in there. And I'm like, that's great and all, but let's extend it to the next level. Don't just put commercials in there, because the audience, they're not stupid. They will know it's a commercial. Let's do it-yourselfers. Do-it-yourself topics, and so we've been slowly adding that with the client, and the client's been very happy at it. In addition, the client's also promoting us on the platform as well. So they'll have that in their showroom or with their clients, and their clients will also be driving. They will also be driving audience to our platform to go watch their do-it-yourself videos.
So beyond that little channel, what does it look like on the home screen? How does that iterate?
Yeah, so I mentioned before, it's not my favorite design until we get some technology upgrades. But if you look on the left hand, depending on what platform you are, we have powered by Mr. Sparky, all labeled throughout the main screen. In each of the different icons, where you either have the VOD assets, or you have the snackable bites or the 2 to 3 minute clips. At the very beginning, there's a Mr. Sparky logo with a deep dive into the channel. When the platform itself launches, and if you decide to launch it live into the linear feed, the first pre-roll that comes up is Mr. Sparky. And then, so it's a multi-pronged. So sponsorship to be the title sponsor is stitched all over the entire platform. And then also there's a spot package. So they're paying for spot advertising throughout the platform, so no different than regular broadcast TV, and then some pre-rolls. So it's kind of a 3-pronged approach for the package.
I want to give the audience a chance to ask some questions. Jill has a microphone here if anybody has a question for the panel. Are we shy this morning? Well, while you're thinking of it, I've got some more things I want to ask. Ian, how do you see OTT's monetization strategy playing out for broadcasters? How do we elevate this platform out of the digital dimes basement to become something more viable?
Well, I don't think it's hard, because it's already not dimes. If you're selling video, you already know you're probably talking at a minimum maybe an $8 CPM, and it goes up from there. So in many ways, I think there's an opportunity with OTT, because you're going to deal with a CPM that's 4 or 5x what they're dealing with on other digital platforms. The question is, can you get enough scale? Can you get enough audience to see that turn into real dollars, and that'll be the real challenge. Can you drive audience to that OTT platform? Will be the key, since the revenue's already there. The CPM's where you want it.
What is that theoretically speaking right now? Because people don't, you get all sorts of answers on this. What's the ceiling on CPMs right now that you're aware of?
Well, I don't work for the sales group, and I don't want to get in trouble for saying the wrong thing, but I think it's probably between, like I said, $8 to $20, and I think it goes up from there when you get into, like, I start talking about personalized or targeting specific demos and things like that. I think you can get a higher CPM than I just mentioned, but your audience is going to get diminished dramatically because you're not targeting as many people.
Does that track with the rest of your experience with OTT CPMs? That sound about right?
Yeah, on the technology side, no, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, $20 to $30 sounds about right. It also depends on if you got a third-party vendor that you're using to help you reach that audience.
I didn't ask you about this before, but I want to just put it out there really quickly. ATSC3, I wonder how much of that, I've been talking to some technologists this week in advance of CES, and it's going to be a big push there this year. How much of what we're talking about is complementary to that, and how much of it is going to be a battle at some point for audiences?
Well, I agree. I mentioned, I meant to bring that up earlier and I didn't. But I do think that the effort we put into OTT will make it easier as ATSC 3.0 rolls out in our markets, because it'll give them a chance to understand different workflows, different technologies, start looking at DAI and other things to understand how they might monetize those audiences, and it may make it easier as we move to 3.0 because you'll have already sort of thought about some of the changes you may need to make in your workflows, in your production cycle, in your sales. For instance, most of the sales groups now sell based on Nielsen numbers, but when you move to dynamic ad insertion, you're looking at DFP, and you're trying to sell CPM. That's sort of a challenge that may come up and may be something that'll have to be discovered and figured out as we get into ATSC 3.0. And again, OTT then provides an opportunity for early discovery and understanding around some of that before it rolls out.
Finally, I want to ask you if you can all put your futurist caps on for a moment, and I'd like to hear what predictions you'd venture for this space in the next year, whether you want to speak to content issues, ad tech, virtual MVPDs, or whatever facet you'd like to address. What's going to be happening where broadcasters' fates perhaps will be changed? Now, I want to have each of you take that, starting with Frank, please.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the technology side, so I'll say actually I think content is still king, and that we could have all kinds of great delivery and the technology could get better and just expose the weakness of our underlying content. So I think it starts with actually working backwards from the audience, recognizing what this new ecosystem is and the quality of some of the programming that we're competing with on Netflix and Hulu. And it reminds me of the early days of Twitter, where we would get an anchor to join Twitter, and they were the #1 anchor in town, but they were a complete newbie on Twitter, and that first tweet was painful if you were actually on Twitter. Like, this guy does not know what room he's in. And I think that is an existential threat to broadcasters, that we can solve all the technology and the content won't be worth watching. So I really think, double down on the quality of content made for platform, and bingo, we have a future in this new space.
Jeff?
I got to echo Frank, and he said it a couple times. We often refer to ourselves as broadcasters. We're content developers. Broadcasting is just a distribution method, just like OTT is, mobile apps and so forth. We need to focus on the content. That's our niche. We can't compete with a Hulu or Amazon Prime with the content they're developing. That's not what we do. We provide local news and information and entertainment to enable our communities to prosper. Our goal is to be on, at least my goal, our vision is to be to provide news and information for our audience over the air and on any digital platform where the audience is. So convenience and where they want to consume us.
Ian?
I would say, we saw Andrew presented yesterday, and one of the things he presented was how much of the audience is moving to these other platforms and essentially cutting the cord or using the television antennas to watch TV as opposed to going through cable and other platforms. So I think that's the thing that we need to watch over the next couple of years, is the acceleration of the trend towards people using other mechanisms to watch TV, and I think OTT is one of the ways that you mitigate that change.
Derek?
So one of the things that we do is we work with not only broadcasters but newspapers. And one of our customers is in Madison, Wisconsin, and so Madison.com is a newspaper, and they're launching an OTT channel with us. And that's something to think about too, is there are going to be other players now in the space that were never there before. Newspapers, pure digital, they're going to be a lot more, it's going to become crowded in the OTT space, and they're going to be delivering niche content. And I think that's what I see in the next couple of years is niche content that doesn't appeal not just to the local level, but they're going to be targeting a national audience.
And we had, last year, we had Micah Gelman was one of our keynotes, heads up video for the Washington Post. Do you think that that newspapers could be just as viable, throw the right punches?
With the right type of content, like Frank's saying, is that this content is going to get better, and it's going to be focused, quality video. And the investigative journalism you were talking about, that's perfect for newspapers. That's what they do well.
So watch out, OTT is opening the playing field. Thank you all very much. I appreciate all of your input here. Thanks to Ian, Jeff, Derek, and Frank for this conversation.